going live. And when we go live, we wait a few seconds for the feed to catch up so it's not cut off. Hey, week 10, everybody. Cecil Lamb is on assignment. Sigmund Bloom here. Dr. Gene Bramall. And the wild man, Matt Waldman. I guess you're feeling tamer tonight because you put Matt Waldman instead of Wildman. But Matt Waldman, give us a game update before we start peppering the doc with questions. Raiders Chargers AFL old school tonight.
Yeah, man, probably my second favorite division to watch in football. Certainly been a good game. You start off with with the Chargers doing a pretty good job running the ball, being able to throw the ball to Austin Eckler, who you're getting a chance to see him expand his game as a receiver. But Rivers has a couple of interceptions on the night. And as a result of that, early on, you have the Raiders being able to drive the ball a little bit with some short fields and some decent running with Josh Jacobs. And they get a field goal, and then you end up with a situation where they end up getting another interception, and you end up with another score, and they take the early lead. But then the Chargers do come back, and they're able to drive down the field with some good runs from Melvin Gordon, in addition to some work being, some timely penalties that were at their favor as well. That one of them including an offsides penalty where that nullified an interception in the end zone for the Raiders that ended up leading to a score. But so it's a tight ball game so far. You can say Derek Carr's looked pretty good in the pocket, being able to find receivers. He's not really exploiting anything downfield at this point. It's more a function of the running game and him being able to just make timely short throws. You've seen some nice plays to their running backs like Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington. And then from really the Charger side, Hunter Henry's been involved a fair bit. They've tried to get the ball to Keenan Allen, but really haven't been able to find Keenan Allen very well. And Rivers has been under pressure enough that it's driven him to throw some balls that were pretty inaccurate.
Yeah, you could have seen this game. The Chargers have a bigger lead if some of those interceptions twice weren't wiped off the board. But take away those interceptions, and the Raiders haven't really stopped the Chargers. I think the biggest headline, Matt, is Melvin Gordon looks good. Melvin Gordon looks as good as Melvin Gordon has looked tonight. The way he's cutting, the way he's finishing his runs, his efficiency, his footwork. He looks patient but urgent at the same time.
And they're opening creases for him. I think I think that's the big thing, is that they're doing a good job doing that, even though Okung left the game early.
Yeah, on an interception return. So we'll see. Dr. Gene Bramall, always enlightening. Man, I mean, of all the not him players, of the players that even if he's not on any of your fantasy teams, you like watching him every week and you root for him. And it's Monday night too, which is major pain, man. George Kittle, just give us some kind of forecast of whether we're going to see him.
Well, thankfully it's a Monday night game, so he's got a little bit more time to recover. But, that was going to be an issue after last Thursday anyway. He was going to have 10 days to recover. You don't really like the tone of the beat writers on Thursday. Sounds like they're preparing to play without him. Kittle has played through injuries before, so we got a long way to go to say that he's definitely out this week. But, after last week, they suggested that he'd gotten through the game okay and he would probably be fine, but not doing much in practice on Thursday. Not a lot of optimism here so far, and hopefully that gets better as the weekend moves along. But I would start thinking about other options if you need them.
All right, Cincinnati Bengal fans, please close your ears to this, because you're not going to like what I'm going to say as a prelude to this question about AJ Green. But if I were AJ Green's agent, I would say to pull a Jalen Ramsey and see if you can suddenly develop a back problem and wait till the end of the season to play, because you've proven pretty much all you needed to prove as a wide receiver in this league. The Bengals still have to prove that they are an NFL team worthwhile of his time. And I don't think they've done that. So, are we going to see maybe a shady back injury out of AJ Green, or is he going to start playing soon?
I don't think he needs to fake a back injury. We know the ankle is still a problem. If this wasn't AJ Green, of all the players that you would think would be, a fairly straight up not wanting to take games off necessarily, but I see zero upside in him playing right now. The Bengals are 0-8. The offensive line is no good. They're playing with a rookie quarterback that was a middle round pick that hasn't been out there at all, really. It's just been a mess. So where's the upside in AJ Green in a contract year, putting himself out there, knowing that when he's done so in the past, that he, the last time he did this with a toe injury, had a more severe situation. And Adam Schefter today said in his report, tore multiple ligaments. And I think we sort of assumed that that was the case, but I don't think anybody knew exactly what the injury was. And as the arthroscopic surgery timetable went along, it became clear that this was more than just a cleanup procedure. So, to see him try to come back within 3 months of an arthroscopic ankle ligament repair is probably pushing it. And it's not that much of a surprise then that he's dealing with some swelling as he continues to ramp things up. And this is the second time it's happened. So, his interview quotes were kind of all over the place today. He said, "Are you going to play?" And he said, "Probably not." Well, what does probably mean? That's pretty much saying you're not going to play. And then he's sort of hinting that maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to play, but saying that he's not going to shut it down if he's able to go at all. So it just sounds like he's kind of conflicted about this whole situation, and he recognizes there's not a lot of upside in going. So, as far as the short term, there's pretty much no chance he plays this week. And when you're dealing with swelling and then getting back into the reconditioning phase, I've always said, expect 2 weeks or at least a week of full practice before you get there. And if he didn't make it through this week, you have to feel like next week is very much in doubt too. And then, if you start looking at week 12 or 13, you could see how it might creep into the situation where, unless I get a contract extension and I know I've got some guaranteed money coming, why do I go out there and play? And again, if this was, we've seen this with so many other players, but this doesn't seem like something that AJ Green would necessarily try. But I'm getting less and less optimistic about this. Not that we ever really were after week 3 and 4, but this does not look like it's going to be a good outcome for him this year.
No, it really was, Gene. One that I think was Simon Shepard, the great of all the great football guys apps, who said the moment the injury happened in our initial discussion over at base camp, it was like, this feels like the thing where he's not going to return and no one's going to know what's happening. There's not going to be an explanation, and we're just not going to know when he's going to come back, and maybe not at all. I mean, I'm all for him taking control of the situation, empowering himself. 2019, the year of athlete empowerment. Okay, Gene. So, we're at that point in the season where we're looking at teams going to the playoffs. We're making final adjustments to the roster. We're looking at the vectors. We're trying to know when the windows are closing and try to sell high, or at least know that we need to have reinforcements behind players that might have helped get us this far. We had a situation with James Conner where one injury after another, and you can. Conner, I think, there's not much nuance. I don't think he's going to play this week, but there is nuance to Amari Cooper. Okay, Gene. Wendell Rita in the chat room says, Dr. Gene, how many injuries does Amari Cooper actually really have? But is this a situation, Gene, where like in a week or two, Cooper's going to be missing time the way that Conner is, and we're going to say, why didn't we get out? Because we have a blissful ignorance about injuries when players are performing, putting up stats through the injuries, when it does leave them in a more precarious position maybe than we know. Is Amari Cooper in a precarious position, or should we just proceed as normal?
I think what we have to worry about with Amari Cooper is he wants to play, and he is going to try to play through all these injuries. And the Cowboys tend to let their players do that. There's an argument that between all the back injuries and other stuff that has gone on with all their offensive linemen over the years, that those guys are on the field and trying to play. We've seen it time and time again with these players. And Cooper, not only does he come back and play, but he plays pretty effectively. Came back and, streaking across the field on that long touchdown catch. On Monday night. So I think what we have to be concerned about is at some point, does Dallas say, you've got to take a week off? We're already past the bye week. You've already had a little bit extra time to recover from the plantar fasciitis. And, if we're ticking off injuries here, there's something going on with his ankle. There's this knee contusion now that's been an on and off issue for a little while. He said he's playing. He said it's something that could be manageable. And when you tell an athlete who wants to play that, they're going to play. So does Dallas finally say, look, there's been too much stuff going on here. We need you to let it rest for a week and see how things go. I don't know when that's going to be. He's such an important part of the offense, and they may not ask him to do that. And if he wants to play, they're likely to allow him to play. But, at some point, it's possible, as you said. I think we ought to be on watch for him to maybe take a week off here just to let things cool off some. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be this week. He was kind of almost, you could just in the interview quotes as you read them, see him smirking a little bit when he said, I don't know what the MRI showed. I just know that they told me I could play through it. Yeah. And I think that's probably what's going to happen.
Gene, is there any possibility that Patrick Mahomes doesn't play this week, considering that in practice they say he's dragging his leg around kind of like a robber who, like, his Brinks truck broke down and he's has to carry it on the side of the road.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as simple as saying he's practiced fully for 2 consecutive days and he's going to play. But they've allowed him to get out on the practice field and continue to do things pretty much since the injury. And the full practice on Wednesday was a way to say, let's ramp you up a little bit and see how you perform and how your leg feels the following day. And not that they're doing a ton in practice, but for him to have 2 consecutive full days of practice is about as reassuring as it gets. And Jay Glazer saying, and I you put percentages on this or not, but 40% risk after 2 weeks and goes down to a 10 to 15% chance of recurrence after 3 weeks, and it's probably not going to be too much lower than that. I still think that there's a chance, and say what you will, but the beat writers maybe meaningfully are making a point of saying that he's still taking reps behind Matt Moore in individual drills and otherwise. And that may not be meaningful, but it's something that they're reporting. And I think they probably would have dismissed it if it wasn't an issue altogether. And I still think there's something to be said for, is Eric Fisher ready? Is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif ready? Andrew Wiley got through last week's game okay. Both of those linemen were limited. Eric Fisher was back to a limited practice on Thursday, and Duvernay-Tardif has had 2 limited practices in a row. So if both of those guys are on the field, I think they're going to be a lot more comfortable with Mahomes standing in the pocket behind that offensive line. If they're not really there yet, and there's any concern about the looseness of his kneecap there, then maybe he will rest another week. But I think the level of optimism that we've had over the last 14 days is such that I think it would be surprising if he didn't play. But I do think there's some room there to where, I don't know that it's 100% guaranteed that he's going to go yet.
Gene, I think it was Pete Davidson from Roto Bond who brought up the idea of fantasy football like dice with, different on the different sides. Maybe in a projection, it might be like he'll throw 3 touchdowns, he'll throw 2 touchdowns. Corey Davis's dice have too many sides that say he's injured or he's not 100%. Right. And we got another one of those this week. He's not practicing. And I'm looking up at Waldman over this way. Which way do I look to look at him? AJ Brown, right? I mean, this is screaming AJ Brown against Kansas City. If Corey Davis doesn't play, will he play?
There's nothing positive about Corey Davis this week. I'll be shocked if he goes. 2 DNPs, nothing positive from the local writers. I don't think he's playing.
All right. Well, Tajay Sharp could also be an interesting play maybe later on down there. He's getting some nice targets. Jacoby Brissett, do we have any hope for him?
Yeah, I think there's hope. He is trying to convince the team that he can play by doing whatever he can in individual drills and then returning to practice again after stressing the knee a little bit on Wednesday. Ultimately, this is going to come down to, is there pain? Is there stiffness? Is there any worry that there's enough looseness in the joint that if if it gets stressed in a certain way, if he gets hit in a certain way, that what was a low-grade situation could become a multiple-week injury. But he's trying to convince them to go. I think Friday is ultimately going to tell the tale for him. I still think I would consider him questionable, and he's kind of in game time decision mode, even though they're going to know before game time. So you can't really consider him a game time decision. But at this point, the decision hasn't been made. So I think there's a good chance that he plays, but he is going to have to prove on Friday again that he looks fine. And this may go all the way down to, what does it look like when you come into the locker room on Saturday morning before they make a decision?
Gene, I'm going to ask you a question that isn't really the typical kind of question we ask. It's just something I want to hear your opinion about, but I knowing that your opinion isn't medically informed, but also informed as a fantasy football player. This has been Bask in Lamar Jackson week. It's been as rightly it should have been, right? I mean, he bested Belichick. He beat the big boss at the end of the board and advanced to the next level in his NFL career, right? He's carrying the ball at a rate that we haven't seen a running quarterback before. I mean, he's I don't want to say reckless because I'm an attorney by training. So reckless is a term that has very specific meanings, but certainly they're not managing Lamar Jackson to spare his health, right? Do you think that this is a ticking time bomb that eventually the football gods will say, you just can't do this forever? Or even just putting a time frame on this year? What do you think about Lamar Jackson and his exposure to injury?
Yeah, I don't think you want to put a snap to snap, game to game series to series timetable on this, but he is running the ball as often as a running back runs the ball. He's a good sized player, but he's not a running back. And if you're going to take that many hits, I mean, how many running backs go down with injuries every year? So, the best of the best players are sometimes durable just because they have a certain quality about them. But overall, your injury risk goes up the more hits you take. Lamar Jackson does a pretty good job of keeping himself out of harm's way.
Yeah.
But not good enough. I mean, there's been plenty of times where he's not going to go down.
He
He's
wants
not
to
going to
win.
slide. He's not going to run out of bounds. So you've seen him time and again go up the middle through the tackles, try to break a couple of tackles at the same time and slip through cracks when he can, like a running back would. So he's behaving on those running plays like a running back in lots of different situations. So the more of those hits he takes, the more risk of injury he has. And again, I'm not going to put a percentage chance that he gets injured on there necessarily, but this is not, quarterback. This is not Aaron Rodgers scrambling 3 or 4 times a game, taking 15 yards, putting his feet in the ground like a dart and popping back up and going back to the huddle. He is taking hits, and he's doing so in a way that puts him at risk. And so, is it a shoulder? Is it a knee? Is it something else that happens? Hopefully you don't see that. But as long as he's going to carry the ball 12 to 15 times a game, there's a risk of something happening.
Yeah, before we go, I ask a next question. I'd love to weigh in on this topic just to say
please.
Just to say that we have to redefine our expectations of what a quarterback is when we look at the quarterback Lamar Jackson is. And we have to understand that Lamar Jackson is in a different offense, and that means that if this offense remains successful, he may not have a 15-year career in the NFL, but that's okay if he has a 6 to 8 year career in the NFL. And I would say, I mean, I don't know, I think we've talked about this number of times that anecdotally you could kind of say that quarterbacks tend to put themselves in more danger when they're playing passive in the pocket and getting hit and not knowing where the hit's coming from, as opposed to running actively in between the tackles. But at the same time, you're going to take some hits that are from angles that you don't expect, even going between the tackles, to Gene's point. Even though he's very careful when he does get to the boundary I've seen him get out of bounds or be able to really sway that. But there will come a point, I think, that Gene's probably alluding to, that he slows down a step and doesn't realize it. And when he does realize it, it's going to be because he gets bent in a direction that he wasn't anticipating.
Well, he is definitely picking his spots, right? But there are times, I mean, all of those, the 4th down play last week, the plays around the goal line, he is going to use his body and take the extra yards where he can get it. So not every one of those 12 to 15 carries is a direct blow that's going to be a problem, but there's enough of them where it's a little bit of an issue. Yeah, I think that's a great point. This is not Tom Brady playing into his 40s. That's not what we're seeing here. No. But also, I don't think we're on the verge of an RG3 like situation where, we don't really want to make the comparison to Michael Vick because there's lots of different ways there, but he runs the ball in a lot of ways that Michael Vick did. He is going to cut the ball upfield and try to take advantage of his speed when he can. So in that sense, he's a little bit like Michael Vick, where, maybe even Randall Cunningham, those guys really didn't, they didn't go down when you expected them to. And maybe there's a little bit of an Aaron Rodgers in there, and earlier in a career when Aaron Rodgers would put his head down and try to get a few extra yards. But I'm with you, Matt. I think there is some worry there, but I don't think there is as much as where we have to say he's not going to last the season.
Yeah, because he's not a bulldozer like Cam Newton. He's not a gazelle with blinders on like Robert Griffin, who, couldn't see an open crease or an open area to save his life sometimes unless it was right in front of him. And then he certainly isn't, Michael Vick, in the sense that Michael Vick thought he was still playing in Hampton Roads, Virginia, taking hits to his thigh pads and doing flips. We were kind of seeing that level of recklessness from Vic. I mean, Vic
leading
was
with his head.
Leading with his head, all of that old school stuff that was crazy. But speaking of a player who looks like he's built like an old school player, but I think plays much more like a new school guy, and I guess that's probably a little bit of a swipe, but he's a talent for sure, is David Johnson. how's his ankle working out, and is he going to get a chance to play?
Yeah, good. Looks like those last couple of weeks that he's rested have done well for him. There was a lot of optimism earlier in the week, and then it was backed up by full practices on Wednesday and Thursday. So I think the big question for Johnson is going to be, how does he split time with Kenyon Drake, and are they going to start splitting them out a little bit more, and how many touches and carries he's going to get, and what are the qualities of those? Because I think he's going to play this week, and I think he's going to be used for a quote-unquote full snap count and workload, but the distribution of those touches is probably going to be different this week.
Looking ahead, Gene, you alluded to this. I want to say that your answer is not going to be positive here, but looking ahead, is Will Fuller worth rostering now? I know that's a real vague, lack of context for well, who do you have, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Just in general, or if you want to just give a vague over under on when you expect he could really be back on the field this year.
I think I wrote week 12 or 13 is the absolute earliest, and that's probably for some limited type of duty there. I think the reason you hold on to Will Fuller is that Houston offense and Deshaun Watson throwing the ball downfield in particular gives Fuller some upside that you're not going to get from other people on the waiver wire. And if you hold that until week 15 or 16, and you hope by that point he's reconditioned enough and fully healthy, we've seen Fuller multiple times have two long touchdown catches in a game, and you're probably not going to get that from a flyer type situation. So unless you are flush with folks with high floors and reasonable upside, I think you probably hold him and hope for the best. But this could easily turn into an AJ Green, a Deshaun Jackson situation where you hold and hold and hold and hold, and it never pans out for you. But the upside of a 100-yard game with a couple of touchdowns is such with Fuller that I think it's reasonable to think about that. And that's a little bit of a different answer last week, where I said I wouldn't necessarily expect him to be helpful. It's a relatively low percentage chance that you get one of those games toward the end of the year. But at least given what I've seen on the waiver wires when I'm trolling for wide receivers at this point, there's probably not going to be much like Will Fuller out there come week 14, 15, 16.
So, Gene, maybe it was the fumes that are carrying over from last week's construction of the terrible towel. But I'd like to know who's the Steelers running back I should have this week if I wanted to play one.
I think it's going to have to be Jalen Samuels. I'm not sure anybody else is going to play. James Conner, Adam Schefter was
Tony
telling
Brooks
us on
James.
Sunday. Well,
Gene,
right.
Don't disrespect him.
He's going to be the only other one on the active roster, right? Connor isn't going to go. Adam Schefter pretty much told us that last weekend. I think they gave him a shot on Wednesday. Let's see how you feel. Didn't go well. Not practicing on Thursday means he's essentially out, and the beat writers are telling us that. Trey Edmonds, maybe they know that Samuels is the only option there, and they're really resting those ribs and giving him a chance to do a little bit of something on Friday. Maybe we see a limited practice or better from Edmonds on Friday, and he's active, and they can do things the way they did last weekend. Or maybe they, Roosevelt Nix, they're resting with a knee injury. Maybe they use him in a little bit different way. But boy, Benny Snell's not going to play. James Conner isn't going to play. I think you hope for the best with Edmonds, but it looks like it's going to be Samuels is pretty close to a full-time role this weekend.
All right, Gene. Thank you. Always. We'll be checking back in on Sunday morning. We'll revisit some of these situations. And we got a good second half in store. But we always enjoy our time with a good doctor. Gene, thank you.
Thanks, boys. Enjoy your week. See you.
All right.
That was the Vulture Express leaving the station.
So we see this game developing. The Raiders' offense is leveling off now. Matt, we get a field goal and a stop. So the Raiders, Raiders defense a little frisky tonight. Eric Harris again making it happen. We'll see. I like the plucky, really no matter who wins, you have a plucky underdog going forward in the AFC playoff picture. Both of these teams been counted out at different points in the calendar. So we'll see what happens there. Oh, the doors
we get a 53-yard miss from the Raiders as well. So
how about Josh Jacobs, by the way? I mean, could we have really pictured, again, this is another one of those situations where I was saying this about Christian McCaffrey earlier, Matt. You're most optimistic, because I was a very optimistic Josh Jacobs evaluation, but I still didn't picture this. I mean, he's really almost fully realized the player that we hoped he'd become in the NFL.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the factor of the offensive line. I mean, it's hard to anticipate how well an offensive line is going to perform, even when you add guys like Trent Brown, Richie Incognito, because do you get the improvement from Colton Miller that you were hoping for? Yes, they get that. Richie Incognito,
He's been terrific. Yeah.
he's fantastic. But you look at him off the field and you wonder if like he's going to self-destruct at any moment, when you see some of the things in the media with him. So the fact that they've been able to come together and play as well as they have, they're like, I've joked around, they're like the woolly mammoth offensive line that they just plow through people. And this has really been the difference maker here. And it just shows that Spider 2Y banana still works.
Yeah.
That the fullback still works, that the short passing game still works, that the 49ers do it. They just do it with a little bit more style. The Patriots do it. They do it with Belichick, and nobody wants to question Belichick. And Gruden, he comes across as the endorsement clown who rants and raves, and everyone wants to make fun of him. But look at what we have going on here. I mean, they're a competitive team now.
And they are a competitive team, and if they can get something going on defense eventually, watch out. So the long term, $10 million, 10 per year, 10-year deal, Las Vegas Raiders. Here we are. It's looking good.
Yeah, we believe in you, Derek Carr. I mean, that's basically what they did. And I mean, Russ Landy and I were talking about it this week, is that basically they said, we believe in you. Take a deep breath, relax. You don't have to freak out that your job's on the line every minute. You don't have a capricious owner where the coach is going to be gone soon. Move in next door. We'll have Sunday, we'll have like Monday afternoon meals and stuff, and hang out and watch some tape, and it'll be relaxed. It'll be be kind of like a friendly job gig that you never actually even see in the NFL, or probably never even heard of.
Well, that's a whole other topic. Like Derek Carr made himself $100 million this year, and I think you're right. I think he to go forward with him. It's clicking, even without Antonio Brown. The whole Antonio Brown story just takes more twists and turns. Becomes more engrossing. Who knows where it will lead. He seems it's like he wants to play. He doesn't want to play, or he at least wants everyone to think he doesn't matter to him, that he can't play while he's seeking to play again. Oh, Antonio Brown.
Yeah, he's off his rocker, or someone advising him's off their rocker, whatever. The whole thing's just nuts, so.
Yeah, well, it plays out, Matt. To me, it plays out like somebody who's isolated, right?
Yes.
It plays out like somebody who's isolated themselves so far from other people that really are just going to tell them the truth, or truly look after their best interests, and not, I don't know if he's driven people away from him, or he's just not let people in. But it seems like nobody is going to be able to penetrate the bubble he has around him for him to be able. That doesn't mean he won't play again. I mean, he can stay in. Plenty of players have been in that bubble and played. But
yeah, he's floated way outside reality, like the oceans. Like he's over the ocean somewhere. He's lost track of dry land when it comes to reality, unfortunately.
Odell Beckham hasn't lost track of reality yet, I don't think. Maybe he wishes he was floating somewhere in Lake Erie and not seeing land, but he's not. He's going to be on the shores of Lake Erie this weekend against Buffalo, against Tre'Davious White. And look, and Odell Beckham is one of those players that could move mountains, with Eli Manning. So that's another thing. There's so much to unpack there, right? Because I'll say I bought into the expectation that, well, if this is what Odell Beckham did with Eli Manning, what will he do with Baker Mayfield, Todd Monken? Yeah, It's been disappointing. Do you see this turning around? Because this is a prime moment. I mean, my finger's on the pulse via all the wonderful people who are part of Football Guys and Twitter, etc., that I see what people are thinking about. I see the questions people are asking, Matt, and they're asking, should I even be playing Odell Beckham anymore? Which means the person that has him in your fantasy league, whether it's dynasty or redraft, is hesitant right now. Some of this is tied to Baker Mayfield. Some of this is tied to the Browns' destiny as a franchise. Is this going to turn around, or are we seeing the next chapter in his career?
It's not going to turn around here this year. I don't think it is. And if it does, it will be because Baker Mayfield has rediscovered that he has to make trust throws to a receiver and force the ball a little bit. Some of the best plays he made were him, showing what you looks like on film was anticipation and two-man route combinations. But as I was mentioning, Nate Zagura and Bo Bishop, on Cleveland Browns Network, it was just, or Cleveland Browns Daily, was just that Baker Mayfield is mostly to blame for this, if you ask me. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's very good at one read concepts, very good at quick hitting types of throws, and that when people talk about accuracy, the way they talked about it, it was with tracking plays in a manner where they weren't really looking at the context of how that projects to the NFL. And so, he's very good that if you spread the field out, he can scan, the full width of the field if he has time. And if it's, one receiver here, one man on him there, one receiver in the middle, another defender over him there, and a third receiver on the other side of the field. But when you have like 2 or 3 defenders on one side and 2 receivers on that side, and he has to read that leverage quickly, doesn't happen. He goes to the check down quickly. If you need him to make a trust throw in the red zone and process it fast, he's a beat to 2 beats to 3 beats too late. He's always been that way. So he has to be really comfortable in order to make those full field reads. And you need to show, trust in a receiver like Odell Beckham, and you have to show anticipation, because what he does best is not only just go up and win the ball, but run great routes. And that means that a great route runner gets open just enough where you can throw the ball to him in a tiny window. And he doesn't trust. Part of it is due to the lack of success he's had this year. Part of it's to the fact that defenses know that if you take away the edges, that he can't bail out and buy time, and you force him to try and step up, that he won't step up in the pocket if there's defenders in front of him, but there's space there for him to step up. He doesn't see the field well in that area. And so as a result of that, he's missing players that he should be able to hit. He's taking too much time on plays that he shouldn't do. And a lot of this is really just teams discovering how they can defend Mayfield a little bit more. There are a lot of plays that he left on the field that if he made those plays, we wouldn't be talking about how bad the offense is.
Yeah.
But there are things that this team could do better. So if they, with Demetrius Harris back at tight end, maybe they can get another tight end in there. They can go 2 tight end set more often and run the ball a little bit more. Use Baker Mayfield under center, because he's actually very good at 3-step, 5-step drops and play action. And you can use him a little bit more in that play action game from center, which allows the blockers to fire off and get downhill a little bit easier in the run game. And that helps the run game. Now they've got Kareem Hunt back. Maybe they can borrow from the Green Bay Packers a little bit and use the Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones combination, where you can pair Kareem Hunt, a little bit out wide here and use him as a receiver against a linebacker and still run Chubb more often than Hunt. I think that's what you really need to do there. But, this is a situation that there's a lot of steps here before I think we get a weekly remedy for Odell Beckham. So if you're a conservative, if you have him and you're worried, I understand why. And I think that it's going to be a tough year from this point on. It's going to be inconsistent. You might have a couple of good games from him. But I think it's going to be based on 1 or 2 targets that make the day for you, as opposed to saying I can rely on consistent volume that's going to be repeatable.
You look at Cleveland, Matt. I think it was Todd Monken today saying Rashard Higgins, that's Baker's guy he's got chemistry with. We need to be playing him more. Steve Wilkes was saying some similar things about Jannard Avery before he got traded to Philadelphia. It said something like, well, if you want to know why he's not playing, expand the game day roster to 53. If it was 53, he'd be making an impact, which just doesn't make sense unless it's a cry for help. Wilkes is basically saying, like, our decisions are going to get overridden by somebody. We're not actually in control of the game day 46, John Dorsey. And it's just a bad organization. I mean, that's bad organizational process. Yeah. It's gonna cause the gears to start to grind, and that's what's happening. So I want to just totally go off on a tangent, because I'm not going to I'm scheduling the couch. I'll have you on again before the end of the year, but
okay,
but not at this exact moment. But now we're going to kind of go on the couch, because what I want to ask you right now, Matt, is what's on the board behind you? What's all that writing behind you?
It's the same stuff that I've had a few months ago. I just haven't gotten a chance to translate it yet. But I took a look at, there's a guy by the name of Sideline Hustle on Twitter by the name of John Lieberman. He's a wide receiver coach. He was an assistant wide receiver coach at Rutgers during like Mohamed Sanu and Leonte Carew's days, and a former Wesleyan quarterback. And he has a really great site on YouTube about wide receiver play. And I would highly recommend, if you want to learn about route running, releases, what receivers do, you can basically go to that site and watch his videos. And they're short videos. He'll even have some players on. He's had Devontae Adams on. He's had Sammy Watkins on. And I've interviewed him a few times for my podcast. But I really liked how he broke down the game and how he labels certain techniques. So I really pretty much watched every video that he's had and took notes. And those are the notes that are up on my board, because that's going to be stuff that I'll be using for the rookie scouting portfolio to revamp some of the route running release type of techniques that I have that are more vague, that I'd like to break down into more detail and put them in categories that are more specific, and adding things to the list that I think were important, that I left room for, but in my categories and how I did it, but didn't really have anything specific there. And now I do. And so it's just a great method for continual learning. So that's all that's up there. And I'm hoping by December, I'll have copied all that stuff down into a spreadsheet that I can create for evaluating those players for the 2021 season with that criteria specifically in mind. And this is stuff that still it's up here that helped me for this year. In addition to that, where I can make notes and do some things with it, and then I'll be on to the next thing.
Nice. It's good. It's like your RAM or ROM. It's so long ago that these terms got cemented in my head that I go back.
My brain's a TRS-80 right now, so I have no idea.
Handy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like there's an old Bukowski poem about all that compatibility stuff when it was all brand new. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately, Matt, is, and this is where you can correct me or run where you want with this, and I'll give you a specific tee up to this topic. But
all right.
I feel like football's not as complicated as it's made out to be sometimes. In that, I know what I'm talking about, Matt, mainly is creating alignment between strengths of a player and what a player's asked to do. And I look around and I see some examples like Kenyon Drake. I don't remember who it was, maybe your buddy Jay Moyer, who put out there with the curvilinear. It's a perfect word to describe a quality of Kenyon Drake's running style and athleticism married to like where they marry,
with
curvilinear motion.
We'll credit Sean Miska for that, who is who coaches Evan or what's his name, Griffin, the defensive end for the Vikings anyway.
Everson Griffin.
He works with him.
Yeah. So, lo and behold, and again, I think Jay Moyer broke this down, just let him hit a gap and wow, look at this guy play. I feel similarly about Devin Singletary and the way the Bills, I feel like Brian Daboll's a real humble coach, especially after what he did with Josh Allen last year. Like, he just looks at what he has and he's like, this is what we can do with it. It almost feels like the idea, coach, defensive, offensive coordinator should be redefined to really know the whole vocabulary of football on your side of the ball, and then being able to teach and even quickly like slap things together so that you can craft something and use your players. I mean, Belichick's made the blueprint for this. So I just like that humility in Brian Daboll looking at, well, okay, this is how because sometimes we talk about this like we really know, just get this player the ball in space. And then another thing in Arizona, playing David Johnson more as a receiver. And that allows Kenyon Drake to stay on the field, or Chase Edmonds when it was Chase Edmonds. Like, just get your best offensive players on the field. That's how you do it. But what I'm disappointed to hear, it could just be that Cliff Kingsbury's lying. Well, we're not going to get Andy Isabella more involved, because you watched Andy Isabella last week on that play, and that was it, right? You don't have to worry about his catch radius. You don't have to worry about him fighting for a contested ball. It's the extended plays, and it's Kyler Murray's field vision and arm talent and willingness to, just like Patrick Mahomes, like try to make things happen, see positive outcomes. He dropped that ball in there, Isabella, and then it was the raw speed of Isabella, and it created that kind of play that I would think that is the kind of play every offense wants to create as much as they can. So should we just say that Cliff Kingsbury is lying, or there's some element I don't understand about this master plan to keep Andy Isabella under wraps?
I think there's a lot of great questions there that you've kind of brought up, and I think the first thing I'd start off with is what you said in the beginning, which is, yeah, there is an element of football, just like life, that's simple, but there are so many layers involved to it that simple is actually kind of profound, and it's something that's elegant, and elegant can be
Elegant's
simple,
good.
but it's also complicated underneath all of that. So I think that when you start with using players to the scheme, every coaching book that I'm reading thus far, whenever it's like some compendium of, whether it's Steve Spurrier or Bear Bryant or, Coach Willie in the quick game and whoever it is that's doing what they're doing, whenever they start off their presentation, they say, we use this scheme because we found it works best for the type of players that we can get. Or that, or it's always about, they came up with the scheme because they didn't have. It's kind of like they came up with the smoked beef brisket because they didn't get the prime cuts. It's the same thing with the wishbone offense or the air raid offense or the run and shoot. It's always about what you can get. And I think that the best coaches figured out that really it's about me being versatile enough to play to the player's strengths. But the problem is that we have the NFL and then we have college game. The college game was more like you could be a fiefdom and be a coach for 20 years, much longer than you could be a coach in the NFL post free agency. So when you look at this situation in the NFL, what I hear over and over again is that coaches get hired because of something they did successfully as a coordinator. And when they get hired on that premise, there's pressure for them, whether it's internal or both internal and external by the ownership, to say, this is what you're known for. This is what I hired you to do. You need to do it this way. And if you go and change it because it's going to change to what your quarterback you drafted is like, or what the running back is drafted is like, then suddenly the owner questions that, and the pressure comes from above. That's like, well, we hired you to have this system. Why can't you just put this player in this system? That seems like, this guy's great here. He'd be even better in your system. Yes. And then and as a coach, you're trying to explain to a billionaire who thinks he's the master of the universe with his ego that they're wrong and that they don't understand how this works, when they're getting pressure from, I joke, the auto dealer magnate who sits next to them in the steam room and listens to Skip Bayless one too many times a week and is like, well, this is the solution. Why can't you make it happen? I hired you. I'm the fantasy owner of this $1 billion organization. And these are the things that I hear. And then there's another layer to this. If that's not happening, the other layer is that I hear from quarterback coaches I've heard, from scouts I've heard, is that there are a lot of people in the NFL. It takes a lot to learn this stuff. It takes you just asked about this board and, looking at this stuff there, think about an entire offensive scheme and knowing like things like defensive splits and alignments and different types of coverages and different types of blitzes and the types of adjustments and the way each lineman's supposed to block and what the techniques are. So, you're looking at individual player techniques, individual position techniques, all of the different types of schematic looks. And you could spend 20 years mastering one area of it. Football's like many different languages, and few people in football are multilingual. Bill Belichick seems multilingual. There are coaches who get brought in or quarterbacks who get brought in. And because you're in that high level and there is high pressure and you're brought in for a certain thing, you stick to that because either you're forced to stick to that or that's the only thing you really know. And then the time that you have to take to like learn something new and be open to it or delegate. And if you've never delegated before because you're in your own little shell here and you were known as that guy for this area. And now you've got to delegate it to somebody else and you don't really know what you're talking about, or you don't know how to switch course to something new. just like people at work where they do that. They just fake the funk, and then their underlings are, their employees are like, God, this guy, my boss doesn't know jack about what we do. I don't even know how he got this job. Well, he might have got it because of something like that. So you have that in the NFL as well. And as a result, you have these layers of where someone like John Harbaugh, who's like, I'm not tied to an offensive concept because I was a special teams coach. So he can go, let me hire Greg Roman and let him take care of it.
Yeah.
And we'll use this, and we'll look at those types of, you don't have as much of that. So as a result, you have those types of layers, and then it just comes down to, a player like Andy Isabella. You have the third thing, which is very possibly that they could just be Xing him out unnecessarily and they should use him more. Another part of it could be that maybe they don't feel like he's reliable enough as a route runner to get open on enough concepts compared to what they use with other players that they have, and they just don't trust him yet.
But Matt, even just like third and long, just like scramble drill plays. I mean, there has to be an application more than what they've been using, considering what how they saw it, how it translated. That's why I'm going to say there's certain, like, let him fail at least. Like, if you think he's not ready yet, at least let him fail and prove that he's not ready yet.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I just brought it up with Austin Eckler to begin this show, not to begin the show, but to begin the game, because I was saying I love how on the first play of the game, Austin Eckler lines up inside slot, runs basically an over pattern or a kind of a post, past a defensive back, cunts back around him, and then Rivers throws it sidearm through a short window, a tight window between the linebacker and the other defender that Eckler just cut across and caught it like 15, 20 yards downfield in this tiny window. And I thought, thank goodness that the Chargers have the stones to actually use Eckler in that way, because Eckler's proven that. And there's a tendency for coaches to say, when they give him one shot to do that and it doesn't work, the head coach is like, well, that's why he's a running back. We're not going to do that again. Whereas if it were a wide receiver where Mike Williams is a rookie and you put him in and have him run that route, he could drop 8 of those throws and they'll go, well, he's just developing. We're going to give him a chance. Austin Eckler, if he's shown it in practice, give him enough opportunities in the game to show that he can. So give him the confidence that he can do it in the game, that you're going to keep going to him that way. And the pressure comes off because there is this inherent pressure as a performer. If you say, this is your big solo moment, we're going to put you on a seam route and have you do this. We know you've been doing it in practice, but if as a player that if you don't catch that ball, they're never going to use you that way again. Think about the pressure that you have as a player, that you're like, this is my one chance to actually take something that's a big part of my game. And if I don't fulfill it in this one play, they may never use me that way again. And so for the Chargers to kind of do it that way with Eckler in a way where they do go to him and they're expanding his game is awesome, but you don't always see that often. And the last thing I'll note is, like, there are players who do things that maybe even position coaches don't understand. Ryan Riddle, our buddy, talked about this in the past, that when he was at Cal, with Aaron Rodgers, with Marshawn Lynch as the record holder for the single season sacks, former NFL player, when he first got there, his position coach at Cal was a wide receiver coach who just got on the defensive line and didn't know anything specific about defensive lineman play and pass rush strategies that were beyond what you would learn in a book. And so as a result of that, Ryan Riddle did things a little bit more creatively. He was more like a Kyle Van Noy type of player who could do a lot of creative different things and sometimes he took risks. And they'll tell you that sometimes, like a quarterback, like a running back, sometimes you do have to bounce it outside. Sometimes you do have to try the cutback and you'll get the big play. You may lose big,
right?
But there are certain places and times where you take those chances. And as a player at that position, you learn that. If you're mature beyond your years, you learn that early. Whereas if you're a coach and you've never done it, you don't understand the between the lines of the pages kind of thing that really make that position special. And Ryan said it took him a few weeks, during a season and even longer all summer to really get his coach to buy into it. And his coach was like, listen, I don't trust it, but you're explaining to me why this is going to help you and the rest of the team. If this doesn't work out, then you got to do it my way the rest of the season. Because the coach, the boss, is kind of like unimaginative, can't see it, doesn't understand it. And the player turned out to be right, ended up working out fine, but it was a lesson. And that happens with NFL coaches because everyone forgets. They don't teach most of the time. They're just there to talk about scheme and make sure the scheme is there. And they'll teach little things here and there. But by and large, most of them are just supporting the game plan install and the scheme install. And if you really want to learn those specific techniques, it's like if you're a musician, you can go to private lesson and the guy shows you 5 different things that day, but you're going to have to go home and practice for about 6 weeks to actually get that thing under your fingers to a level where it's actually going to work out for you, unless you're a beginner and you're making rapid improvements. And at the pro level, you're not usually a beginner.
Yeah. Just another chapter, Matt, in your ongoing excellent saga where you tie like workplace problems in our society back to things that we say, why is it not better in the NFL? It's all the same thing. And I keep seeing that also in the people that follow us on Twitter when things come up. I keep hitting this note lately, like the meritocracy is a myth. People are like, yeah, it's not just in the NFL either.
No. And thank you for giving me the forum to do this. I mean, it's nice to be able to do that. And the other thing that kind of ties into it is politics. I mean, if you see, and I'm not going to go anywhere crazy, everyone, but like you think about Edward Snowden on Joe Rogan. And one of the things that he said, that however side you feel about Edward Snowden, more power to you. I'm just bringing up that he said in his interview that when he was with the CIA, that you noticed with the FBI, CIA, and all the other groups that he was interacting with, that in politics as a whole, that and federal government as a whole, that there's this whole idea of risk management behavior, which is very much prevalent in the draft that I've talked about before. And the tie is it's not about it's about making sure that you're not to blame for the decision that's made. And that leads to bad decisions, because it's always about, how do I cover my assets, as opposed to actually trying to make a decision that could win.
Yeah. That's what I always say when people look at draft evaluation work, like amateur draft evaluation work. They say, well, your job's not on the line. It's like, but that makes the work better. Your job being on the line means you have to make defensible choices that the person you're answering to understands, because that's a whole other problem. But
hey, and the same thing can be said. That's true. That may be true. But if you're selling a product and you're making a living off of it, your job's on the line. Enough times, maybe not as immediate as those guys, because I don't want to compare that to the pressure that's there. But it's still, still your livelihood. I mean, the quality of our work. If you take pride in what you do.
Yeah, and just our work. Well, for our work, Matt, I think it's more like our ability to engage necessarily than like being right or wrong at the end of the day. Really quick, because we just got a couple minutes left. And I brought this up earlier, so second time for people that were listening to the preview. But I want to see how this strikes you. I don't even know if you saw this. One of Sean McVay's mentors, Mike Tomlin.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That's cool.
What do you think he said when he said like what it is that like he really looks up to in Tomlin?
Probably how he relates to people.
Yeah, his charisma, his leadership, his guys follow him.
Yeah, and there's buy-in on that level. And
that's that's a hard quality of head coach for us to evaluate from the outside. Like, we can look at all the tactical stuff where Tomlin isn't great, and just crucify these guys for the tactical decisions. And this was what the Steelers season needed this year. Anyway.
Yeah. And Chad Spann, I mean, who I've talked about a lot here, I've always bring up that of all the places he had stops in the NFL, and he had, I think, 4 or 5. Yeah. He said the Steelers was his best experience by far, and that the culture that the Steelers had was very team oriented, very welcoming, very much everyone tried to teach one another and help one another, and was encouraging of one another. And that there was a level of organization and the way that you deal with people that made you feel like a person, an important part of what was going on, even if you were a practice squad player. And so that says a lot, that it would be, about Mike Tomlin. on that level. And that's where I think people get kind of down about coaches, is they don't understand that really a lot of the coaches that get kind of denigrated are the guys who do what they're supposed to do, which is manage people.
Right.
They're not supposed to be what Andy Reid does, which is have the offensive game plan or be a big part of that. He does part of that too, and he can manage people and be a teacher, but the biggest part, the most important part really should be delegating to other people, letting them to do their job, and creating an environment where people do their best and feel valued for what they do so that they can do their best.
Yeah,
and
invest in people.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean it has to be happy, happy, joy. Bill Parcells can put people on edge, and you can motivate in different ways. Sometimes you have to do that early on too. Sometimes early in your career, you have to be an ass kicker to basically, to change a culture. You might have to put the fear in people to do that, but at some point, fear only lasts so long. So when people say, well, that style doesn't work, you have to have multiple styles to lead people.
Sure. Well, I would say, Matt, and I'm going to go too long over since we're at 10 o'clock, Central, 11 Eastern. And thank you, everybody. Brian Sumner says the live show goes by entirely too fast. It's true, because we enjoy spending time with each other. What can you say? So head coach, CEO type, really your job, like you said, is delegating and picking the right people, and picking people in a way that is consistent with an organizational clarity, of
and
what's
being
the values.
Strategic with the information that your people give you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, trusting them. And then, you have to make those final calls, which is sometimes where Mike Tomlin falls short. But I brought this up last week on Twitter. I think that it would be great if we just could circulate questionnaires to all the different important decision makers in organizations, where they have to answer questions like what advantages are we building to win games as an organization, or what do we value in this organization, just to see if the answers were like remotely the same from like the GM, the head coach, saying, just to see if because you could probably just give a questionnaire to, the owner, the GM, the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and then it just have them all answer, without knowing each other's answers, get their story straight. Just answer these questions, and you could read those and have a pretty good idea without knowing the names on them, the questionnaires, which organizations were the good ones and were the bad ones. Not even by what they said, but just how much agreement there was.
That's right, because the Colts would probably be aligned. The Ravens would probably be aligned. The Patriots would probably be aligned.
The
Browns would probably be a dysfunctional mess. Yeah. And then the 49ers would be aligned. And what's interesting is Russ Landy brought this up on the pod, this week too, was that if you look at how the Patriots do things and how the Patriots and the 49ers do things, the coach pretty much runs the show with those when you talk about scouts and picking players and how you look at what you want. Whereas with like the Steelers and with the Giants or with some other teams, it can also be about the GM running the show with that, but it can work, and it has worked in the past. So it's really just about strong leadership and making sure that you know where that strong leadership is and empower that. And I think that the best teams do that well.
Yeah, putting the team ahead of your ego, ahead of your own interests, basically. And people, and if other people in the organization see that, they'll follow and they'll do the same. You
mean not flipping the bird to your old city and drafting Vince Young when you could have had somebody different? I don't know. Something like that. I'm sorry. We shouldn't make fun of the deceased, but I mean at the same time. But I mean it's
No. It's a goofus and gallant. It's what not to do. At the very least,
as a lesson learned. That's a lesson learned.
Well, we always learn lessons when we spend time together here with everybody. We love the chat room. Week 10, great game, going down to the nitty gritty. These are the quarters, the drives that are going to define these team seasons. As we see every one of these games where two teams that are still in the playoff picture match up are mini playoff games. And just like in fantasy football right now, the stakes are getting higher. We're thinking about every decision. We're putting everything under the microscope. It's fun. It's why we do it. It's fun to do it together. Thank you for doing it with us. You're so very classy.